Okay, start recording. Hello, everyone. This is China Today, the first of the second term in 2024. And today we will talk about sustainability. But like before, I would like to mute everybody first. And then if you have any questions, you can interrupt me at any time. Just unmute yourself and say something, then I will hear and everything. I will respond to it. Today we are on sustainability. So let me just frame the discussion first. We know that China has been developing very fast, especially in the last 40 years. And in 2010, February 15, when Obama was interviewed by our Kerry O'Brien, Kerry asked Obama, do you feel that you are making headway with President Hu on this front? At the time, is Hu Jintao being the president, the one before Xi Jinping? There is a part of this answer which actually alerts everybody. Obama answered, I can't find the video. I watched this part of the video, but unfortunately I can't find it again. So I have to rely on the transcript. At that time, Obama said, well, you know, I think China has an enormous interest in solving this problem. You know, if you talk to Chinese leaders, I think they will acknowledge immediately that if over 1 million Chinese citizens have the same living patterns as Australians and Americans do right now, then all of us are in for a very miserable time. The planet just can't sustain it. So they understand that they have got to make a decision about a new model that is more sustainable, that allows them to pursue the economic growth that they are pursuing, while at the same time dealing with these environmental consequences. We know that at the moment, we Australians, as well as the Americans, and plus a number of countries in Middle East, are huge energy consumer. And at the moment, our energy is still coming from fossil fuel. Whether you believe our climate is influenced by too many carbon dioxide being emitted into our atmosphere, treating our environment as a rubbish dump, rubbish bin, is not very clever. So we need to think about how to handle this problem. Now, American at the moment is consuming about a quarter of world's resources. So by only 5% of people, they are a major consumer in both energy and other resources. China has about 4 times the population of America. So if Chinese people use as much resources as Americans, and Australian included, then we will need more than one planet to supply the resources necessary. But don't forget, we have another 3/4 of human beings living on the planet also require resource. So that this sustainability is a very important issue. Can China continue to grow economically while maintaining the health of the planet? So that is a major question. I'm not going to read the rest of the sentence here now. So let's do a little bit of a GDP comparison. So this is comparing China, which is in red, and America, which is in green. And the middle blue part is the difference, between the GDP. Now remember, China GDP is very small compared with American, although China's population is about 4 times as large as American. So this starting instantly is 1960. At that time, the total GDP of China is 580.6 of something. Now that something is trillion. Okay. So at that time, no, sorry. The Chinese say is 100 billion. Okay, so the unit is 100 billion. 100 billion because Chinese unit advances in every 4 digits rather than 3 digits. So there is a little bit of adjustment here. So the unit here is 100 billion. But anyway, we just look at the relative growth between China and America starting from 1960. And we see that China is just about 10% the GDP of America. And by the way, this data come from the World Bank. Not here, the World Bank. Okay, now let's start. Let me see whether I can't turn off the sound. It has noticed the difference has been increasing. So American continue to grow, China continue to grow, that China's American difference also continue to grow. Now it is 1975 now. We know that Mao Zedong died in 1976. So Mao died from 78. Deng Xiaoping becomes the premier leader, and then China started this open and reform. But the difference between China and America is still increasing. It is 54,000 something by 1990s. It is still increasing while China integrates itself into the world economy. Now we are coming to a critical point now. By 2001, China joined the World Trade Organization, WTO. After joining the WTO, the difference is still increasing, but China growth is rapidly advancing. We are noticing the red bar here is quickly coming, and the difference is getting smaller and smaller and smaller. By 2011, there's Americans started their so-called Asia focus. Okay, this video stopped in 2024. We know 2020 is a very special year. So things after 2020 to 2023 is our COVID problem years. So there's a lot of different factors affecting. But what we are seeing here is that China's GDP within this human life range, 60 years, about 60 years, catch up to the about 70% of American GDP in terms of exchange rate. But if we look at GDP in terms of purchasing power, that means how much I get a haircut in Beijing in terms of the renminbi equals how much I get a haircut in Washington in terms of USA, and equate that two numbers as the same, then this is a purchasing power. If we use purchasing power, the Chinese GDP overtakes American GDP in 2011 April. Quite precise. But anyway, GDP larger than American doesn't mean the per capita is larger. We talk about the Chinese has about 4 times the population of America. So even when China and American have the same GDP, on average, China is still 1/4 poorer than America. Is equal to Americans' 1/4 wealth in terms of per capita. But at the same time, because China is a very large country, so China itself is not having equal development. Obviously, at the beginning, most of development concentrated in the east coast of China, Shanghai, and then Hangzhou, Nanjing, and then along the way down even to Shenzhen. All these areas are all on the coast. So China's main development is in the coast. In the coast, the living standard is now catching up with the wealthiest city in the world. For example, in Shanghai, Beijing, these areas, the average GDP matches any high-income countries. But at the same time, because there's a very large percentage of Chinese living in the inland and in the west part of China. So on average, the Chinese people's GDP is still just a quarter of American per capita. So that is the fact on the line. The question is, will China continue to develop? I think the answer is very simple. There's no reason why China shouldn't continue to develop. It depends on whether Chinese can do it or not. But anyway, the track record shows that in the last 60 years, China achieved many, many remarkable historical success. So there's no reason we can say China will not continue to grow. But the question is, how about the resource? How about the planet? Can planets support that? There are 2 ways to do it. One way is certain resources currently are consumed by US being liberated out and let the rest of the world share it. That means lowering the living standards in area like USA, Australia here, or a number of high-income countries. I think the answer is no. Nobody wants to do it, including us. In Australia, we enjoy our lifestyle. We might save a little bit on energy, etc. We will try to improve the use efficiency. But you want us to heavily cut back to say a quarter of the energy we use. Nobody will accept it. Not only the population won't accept it, politically, no political party can sustain a claim to cut back on the living standard. So cutting back is not a way to go. So the other way to grow is better use of the resources. Chinese need to develop a way so that it will meet its economic growth while keeping its consume of resources almost steady. At the moment, in terms of climate contribution, Chinese put forward the idea that by 2030, so still 7 years to 2030, 6 years to 2030, China will peak its carbon dioxide emission. And then by 2060, China will become a carbon neutral country. Now that is a big ask, given China is also the world's manufacturing center. So we are looking at this. So the next slide here is I try to use another video. This video is a bit long, it's about 1 hour. So I will just play this. And if you have any questions, want to interrupt, just unmute yourself, and then we'll stop there. discuss, and then we'll continue playing the video. Now, this video comes from about a week ago, not too long ago. An economic professor from one of the American universities. He is a communist. He studied communist economy, so he is a communist. Richard Wolff. I noticed him because he had made a very convincing analysis of what happened in United States since the unlinking of US dollars with gold, the fall of the Bretton Woods system. By the middle of Second World War last century, the bankers in United States convinced the world's major power, at that time mostly Western power, to move their gold to New York Federal Reserve Bank in exchange for US dollars. And US promised that 36 US dollars is equal to 1 ounce of gold. And this is freely exchangeable by presenting US dollars to the Federal Reserve Bank in New York. They can get their gold back. So US dollars is now was linked to gold. But during the Vietnam War, a number of countries noticed that Americans are spending a lot of money in war. They are questioning whether the amount of US dollars they held will be able to convert back to gold. And they started withdrawing gold, physical gold from Federal Reserve. President Nixon found that non-sustainable. So he put up an executive order saying that from now on, people can get gold only from the gold market instead of going to the Federal Reserve. That means US dollars is now unlinked with gold. US dollar become a fiat currency, meaning this is we trust that we can use the US dollars in exchange of equal value later on by accepting the US dollars today. It's only based on trust. And from that point onward, all governments are now issuing fiat-based currency. No government, except a very few small governments, do have the resources backing up their currency. One of them is Hong Kong. Hong Kong dollar is 100% backed up by equal amount of foreign currency. So if a bank in Hong Kong, let's say Hong Kong and Shanghai Bank in Hong Kong, want to issue 1 million Hong Kong dollars, then Hong Kong and Shanghai Bank need to give the equivalent of 1 million Hong Kong dollars in foreign exchange to the financial system at the branch, the fund in Hong Kong. You deposit that amount of foreign reserve into that account, then you can issue the bank notes. So Hong Kong dollar is the only one which is 100% backed up by foreign reserve. Most other countries doesn't, including China. China's bank, China Bank, can print as many renminbi as it is needed. So the whole international finance is now almost 100% based on fiat currency. So that is the current situation at the moment. But this video will talk about several Chinese development and then we will try to understand it from a different point of view. The point of view is mostly from a Marxist communist point of view, talking about contradictions. Okay, let's start.
Welcome, friends, to another edition of Economic Update, a weekly program devoted to the economic dimensions of our lives and those of our children. I'm your host, Richard Wolff. Before jumping into today's topic, which, by the way, is called The Phenomena of China, I want to remind you that we have a volunteer, Charlie Fabian, who's ready, willing, and able to receive your suggestions, materials, and so on by email if you have ideas for segments we might construct for this program. Just send them in to Charlie at the following email address, charlie.info438@gmail.com. Okay, why am I devoting this program to China? Is it because China is extremely important in the world today? Partly. Is it because China is kind of the new thing changing the world today? Yep, that's another part of it. Is it because China is poorly understood, particularly in the United States, but in the West generally? Yes, that's yet another reason. China is changing and shaking the world in ways that are going to be central to our experience for the foreseeable future. It deserves a great deal more attention than it's getting, or to be a bit more precise, it deserves attention that is balanced, that is trying to understand what's going on, and that is not propagandistic, painting them bad so that we in the West look better by comparison. It's a childish game, it's dangerous, and it's not what we're here to do. What we're trying to do is get an overview that makes some sense. Whether you then end up supporting China, criticizing China, or some mixture, that's left to you. Okay. First of all, let's begin by saying it really is a phenomenon what China has done. It deserves everyone's awesome recognition of that fact. What do I mean? Well, this is the greatest story of economic growth that we probably have in the history of the human race. Here was a country over the last 70 years, the largest by population in the world, with well over 1 billion and approaching 1.5 billion people in unspeakable poverty as little as 70 years ago. One of the great horror stories of poverty in the world. And in those 70 years, this country has raised 1 billion or more of those people out of abject poverty and into the modern world. With that sized population, that's never been done before. If you take all of Europe together, which is 1/4 of the population of China, it took them 200 to 300 years to do something comparable to the economic growth record of China in 70 years. It is extraordinary. Many other features of China are less extraordinary. There are good things and bad things one can say about it. No one is denying that. But when it comes to economic growth, to escape from poverty, to produce a modern economic reality in terms of the production and distribution of goods and services, that goal, which is the major goal of most people on this planet and has been for the last 70 years, there's one outstanding performer, and no one else comes close. That's the People's Republic of China. And whatever else you may think about or decide about this society, pretending that what I just said isn't the case is not going to make your understanding one whit better. It's going to make it worse. And how is it different and unique in still other ways? Well, it's not like the competition, for example, that the United States has with other capitalist countries. We are now competing with China, we in the United States. Western Europe and the United States on one hand, China and its allies, the so-called BRICS on the other. These are the two great competing blocs, and I mean really competing. China outproduces the United States in many commodities. China has achieved levels of technological sophistication with which the United States really has to struggle to keep up. That's why President Biden is throwing money at semiconductor chip producers. That's why we have a 27.5% tariff against the Chinese electric vehicles, because they are the dominant electric vehicles being produced in the world today in terms of quality and price. So there's stiff competition, but it's unlike anything the United States has before, because before our competition was in other capitalist countries, Britain, France, Germany, Italy, Japan. Now the competition is with a society that doesn't call itself capitalist, that calls itself socialist, that has an enormous role for the government and one for a communist party that is clearly in charge. That's new, that's different. That's going to produce different outcomes. It's also a competition not like the one the United States had with the Soviet Union. Why? Because China has, for most of the period of the last 70 years, now for more than half of it, openly welcomed capitalist enterprises to develop inside China. Both those owned and operated by Chinese individuals, private capitalist enterprises, and those brought over from Western Europe, Japan, the United States. There is a private sector, roughly half the economy, and there is a state sector, the other half. This is unlike anything that existed in the relationship between the United States and the Soviet Union. So you have a peculiar relationship. There's really more collaboration between the United States and China than there ever was economically between the United States and the Soviet Union. But there's also economic competition, much more profound than existed between the United States and the Soviet Union. In other words, the Chinese experience, especially in its relationship to the United States and to the larger private capitalist world of Western Europe, North America, and Japan, is unique in many, many ways. And that has to be understood, given that China is now the second most developed and powerful influence on the world economy, and might very well, before the end of this decade, be the number one shaper of world economic events. To get us to understand this extraordinary achievement and this extraordinary reality that we live in, as always, we need to do some history. And the history I'm going to be doing with you briefly in the rest of the first half of today's program is designed to get us set to understand the economics and politics of China today. Xi Jinping, the current leader in China, speaks of 100 years of humiliation, roughly 1850 to 1950. 100 years during which China felt itself to be, then and now, humiliated as Western countries, particularly, took over bits and pieces of China fighting wars, taking over whole cities, and plunging the society into levels of poverty much greater than what they had seen before. On the other hand, there never was a full colonialism. China kept its independence, unlike India or Indonesia or most of Africa and so on. So you have a mixture of humiliation and independence. There were never settler colonists. No Europeans settled in to large parts of China. Yeah, they had places in cities along the coast, but they never took over the country the way, for example, they did in South Africa or New Zealand or Australia or the United States or Canada, and I could go on. More modern, once the 20th century came, two terribly interesting things happened almost at the same time. A final war defeating the Chinese, known as the Boxer Rebellion, saw the Europeans come together to deal a pretty devastating blow and to show that they were the dominant power, even if they didn't settle into a colonial relationship. And not so surprisingly, very few years after the Soviet Revolution in Russia, in 1917, a few years after that, Chinese do a revolution too. Chinese communists, inspired in part by the Russian Revolution, begin the Long March, begin the movement led by Mao that would eventually, in 1949, lead to the victory of the Communist Party and its army over the friendly to the West army of Chiang Kai-shek, the little bit of capitalism that had been implanted in China after the Boxer Revolution by the Western powers, who apparently hoped over the long run to develop a more complacent, subordinated capitalism in China. Their plans were defeated. A civil war brought the communists to victory in 1949. They were in alliance with the Soviet Union from 1949 to around 1960. Then the Soviet Union and China split with bitter, difficult, even occasionally military conflict between them. The Chinese then undertook a development of their own, different from the Soviets in Russia. Yes, socialism has many forms, and for the last 60 years, China has gone its own way to produce its own distinctive version of socialism or communism, depending on which word you think fits better. And it's in these last 60 years, and particularly in the last 40 or so, that the achievements with which I began today's program were made. It became a powerful country. It became a socialism with Chinese characteristics. I'm about to go in them as soon as we go to the second half of today's program. But I want to stress that it was against the humiliation of those 100 years that the Chinese undertook to prioritize becoming once again the unhumiliatable, powerful enough, rich enough, productive enough to not be humiliated by the West again. That is their central theme, and that they have achieved. Stay with us. We'll be right back for the economics and politics of this phenomena of China.
Okay, I'll stop here for the time being. I will continue later on. So, Richard Wolff framed this development against the ideology struggle. On one hand, in the Western world, we have a pure capitalist system plus so-called free trade. Of course, we have other values like human rights, other things, but what we are looking at the moment is economy. So we are talking about a political economic reality. The West is a democratic by election and government is formed. And on the other hand, we have China. China goes through a socialist movement. Of course, China had not adopted this socialist idea and call it socialism with Chinese characteristics. But once you add a descriptor to socialism, it's all changed. China is run by one party. It is always ruled by the Communist Party. You can't change it. It is in the constitution. And the Chinese people support this as well. So there's one big difference. On one hand, we have the pure, smooth, invisible hand controlling the flow of resources by capitalism, by capital. On the other hand, we have a central, powerful, politically idolized to socialism's single party country. But what we have seen is in the last 60 or 70 years, this system, this single party, socialist oriented, no direct election to change the government system, wins in both socially and economically. Socially meaning this system is able to lift 1.4 billion people out of abject poverty. At the beginning of the People's Republic of China in 1949, Chinese people are poor, very, very poor. Even some 10 years after that, in 1960, as seen in our previous video, the total Chinese GDP is just 10% or more, a little bit more than 10% of United States GDP, given it has about 4 times the population. So we will surely say that at that time, Chinese people's average wealth is only 1/40 of Americans. Within this very short period of time, this system, these Chinese political systems solve the abject poverty problem, built China into a modern China. We can appreciate the Chinese city. We can appreciate the high-speed rail in China. China becomes the world's largest producer of almost everything. It is remarkable. How do they do that? And will that path be sustainable? Okay, let's continue with Richard Wolff. Hey.
Welcome back, friends, to the second half of today's economic update. We're talking today about the phenomena of China. We did some overview, we did some history, and now we're going to turn to the economics and the politics of this remarkable phenomenon. First, the economics of the last 30 to 40 years. Economic growth has been nothing short of stupendous. If we use the measure known as GDP, gross domestic product, a rough measure of the total output of goods and services in a year, then for most of the last 25 years, if you rank the countries of the world according to how much they were able to grow their total output, to grow the wealth they were able to produce, then number one on that list, year in and year out, was the People's Republic of China. No one else has a record even close to that. Remarkable as the last few years are of economic development in India, in terms of the long flow of years, not close to what the Chinese did. And let me be clear, it's not just that the growth of output is number one. Raising the average wage of their people was equally stupendous. It's gone up between 4 and 5 times in 40 years. Let me compare that with the United States' level of wages, real wages, we call them, adjusted for prices, where the Chinese quadrupled or better the wages people actually got, the real wage of goods and services they could consume. The real wage in the United States went up, I don't know, 10 to 20%. 400 to 500% in China, 10 to 20%. Again, understand, not even close. If you want to understand the satisfaction of the Chinese working class with its experience, there it is, a level of economic well-being achieved in record time, the likes of which have never been seen in the world before. Even taking into account spectacular growth that had existed in the United States in the late 19th and early 20th century, or in Japan at the end of the 19th century, or Germany. The Chinese outranked them all. The role of China in world trade, unbelievable. It became the manufacturing center for the whole world in this period. It becomes the crucial player in world trade, the crucial carrier of goods and services on all the oceans of the world. It's an extraordinary arrival at superpower in economic terms status, literally bested only by the United States, and then by a shrinking amount of difference between China and the United States in terms of economic growth. The uniqueness of China is also that it did not go either to be overwhelmingly a private enterprise economy, the way the United States and Britain had become, nor overwhelmingly a state-owned and operated enterprise system, the way the Soviet Union had become. That split with the Soviet Union in the 1960s, that I mentioned before our break, had enormous consequences, so that over recent decades, China has become a nation roughly one-half private capitalist enterprises and one-half state enterprises, with both halves sharing the old capitalist structure of employer-employee, which is probably why the Chinese wisely don't call their society communist. The name of the party is communist, but what it has achieved, they call socialism, something that is more indifferent from capitalism, but not yet communism, which is rather an interesting way of understanding how China literally redefines what the words mean by the way it has chosen to develop. I want to mention some of the things that are distinctive about China because they follow from the way they've organized their economy. Whereas in Western treatments, they're often dealt with as though they show that the Chinese are fumbling or bumbling or making mistakes. Let me give you some examples. In China, because the economy is planned by the government and by the Communist Party that shapes the government, they build housing before people need it. So if you see a photograph of areas of some city where there are lots of apartment buildings that are empty, this is not because they don't know what they're doing or they're making mistakes. they plan their economic growth, where they want the city to be, how big it will be, is all done in relationship to the rest of the society's growth. So they build before people need it. So when they can, people can then move from wherever they are into waiting apartments that are all set for them. You may not like the outcome, that's another question. But it's not a mistake or it's not a flaw. It's the way they organize things. Likewise, they have managed to move hundreds of millions of people out of the rural agricultural parts of China to the urban industrial. Modern industrialization took centuries in Europe. It took a century or two in the United States. It took 30 to 40 years in China. And they moved a larger population that was in a more backward agriculture into modern industry. A transformation that could have and should have and would have exploded other societies because of the tensions and the difficulties and the pain of social change. They managed all that to become what they are today. Again, full of mistakes along the way, of course. Dead ends, trials, errors, but achievements that have to be recognized in what has been produced at the end. They really ended mass poverty and have been recognized by the United Nations for having done that. Again, all kinds of frictions and problems, for sure. But ending poverty is no minor achievement in a world which still has vast amounts of it on all the continents remaining. And then finally, they committed themselves, after they had developed a basic industrial modern society, they targeted the United States as their model to surpass, as their model to overcome. And that they have worked ceaselessly to do, so that they are the place where the best modern electric vehicles are produced. And they are the only part of the world that can compete with Google, with Apple, with Intel, with any of the other highest levels of technological modernization that have been achieved in the West. Yes, the neocons that control government here in the United States portray them as the great evil. Yes, they have certainly surpassed the Soviet Union and quite long ago in being economically more developed and therefore with a greater base for whatever military they've thought to do. So let me turn then to the politics of China. Yes, China has a dominant political reality, and that is Communist Party of China. It is the dominant political party, no question. It is against capitalism and for socialism. But before you rush to whatever that might mean to you, think about this. In the Chinese view, the United States has a political dominance of a pro-capitalist political party. For them, it has two wings, Republican and Democrat. Two different wings that agree that capitalism should be, could be, and must be the dominant reality of the United States. Well, the Chinese argue that's exactly their view for socialism. So yes, they exclude capitalism, but they point to the United States as excluding socialism. You could like one and not the other, but you can't pretend that they're all that different. The Communist Party in China has one way. The Capitalist Party in the United States, they aren't, has two. And the Americans get to choose between those two and nothing else. No one else is allowed to intrude on that monopoly except on the edges, and that's where they're kept. And that's where they've been for the last 70 years, just like the monopoly the Chinese Communist Party operates, the Capitalist Party in the United States operates the same. The Chinese are also proud of having faced up to uneven development. The fact that in capitalism, one part of a country is developed and another part is allowed to languish behind. They have focused on overcoming that uneven development, something Marx originally understood about capitalism. It always creates prosperous area over there, poor area over there, good neighborhood in their city over here, terrible neighborhood over there, etc., etc. The Chinese said, no, we are going to develop. We're going to give special emphasis to the poorest areas, either bring the people out of there and move them to better areas or transform those areas. And basically, they've done a good bit of both. It's a very interesting new way of understanding the task of politics to offset the uneven development that flows out of capitalism. And politically, they have tried to build an alliance.
Oh, sorry, I think I can't continue with the because I click on something wrong area. So with what Richards had laid out, we are looking at two different political systems. One is we can change the government easily by election. One is you can't change the government. Government is always the same government. You can't change. So that's one big difference. The other big difference, as Richard has just pointed out, is one is neo-capitalism. Is always capitalism as the way of distributing the resources in the country. Whereas in China, we have the so-called socialism, where, yes, part of the system is also using capitalism to distribute the resources, the private part of the Chinese economy, about half of that. And then the other half, the state-owned enterprises. These are fully controlled, planned economy. The resources direction is not by capital flow. The resource direction is by the need of the political system. The political system say, I want to remove all abject poverty. Well, then these state enterprises take into action and do what the political arm say it has to do. It's very different. In terms of risk, we always say, okay, if we don't like the government, we can change it. So there's less risk of falling behind, because if one party do the wrong thing, we can change it and then we adjust our path. But what we are seeing today is that every government, after election, then they are disassembling what had been done by the previous government and lay out their plan and do what they want to do. But before the objectives is fully achieved, the government changed. And all the works we have been done are disassembled again. And then new plan put forward. For example, when I first come to Australia about 30 years ago, I heard people talk about having a train line from Sydney to Doncaster. Today, still talk about that. We don't see a single track laid down. Another thing which really put me into a very angry position is the promise of the NBN. The original plan is have optical fiber into every house. Today, my connection coming in is on coaxial cable. It's still the copper technology, far from the optical fiber capability that was permitted at the beginning. That is the risk of a democratic governments. They don't deliver, and they don't need to deliver, because they can always blame somebody else. Now I changed because they put me down, so I can't continue to work. If I continue work, then you can say whatever you like. Every unsuccessful promise have an excuse. But in China, no, you can't. You don't have any excuse. Very simple reason, because it's always the same party ruling. But of course, there's a huge risk as well. What if the party made a wrong decision? For example, like what happened now in Venezuela. They elected a neoliberal capitalist president. They used the shock doctrine, seriously depreciate their currency. Now they are suffering a 400% inflation. It might end up being a hyperinflation and ripping off every people's wealth. And is that reversible by re-electing a new government? I don't think so. So there are risks. Yes, China has own risk, having a dominant party. And if the dominant party made a wrong decision, then everybody suffer. But so far, it seems China has been avoiding all this. Yes, as talked about by Richard, let me change the view to a better view. Okay. Yes, by talked about by Richard, we see that there are mistakes taken here and there, here and there. But somehow, some mistakes are larger than the others, yes. But overall, the whole country move forward, and that is the point. For example, talking about the cost of high-speed rail. People are saying the Chinese government is putting too many resources into the high-speed rail. The high-speed rail total liability is huge. Correct, all these are correct. And some of the lines is not profitable. Some of the lines is running at a loss. Just running, the everyday running cost is higher than the maintenance or the interest for that line. But Chinese government still keep on building high-speed rail. So we in the West say Chinese government still spending so much resources into building the high-speed rail. But if you look at it, not from a capitalist point of view, instead of looking at each line having a balance sheet, we look at the whole country and including all the other benefits provided by high-speed travel. Suddenly, the whole equation changed. Whether the Chinese government can afford it or not, this is part of our sustainability. So in the coming weeks, I want to talk about sustainability from 2 points of view. One is from the political point of view. Is this party system, the current government, sustainable in the foreseeable near future? I'm not talking about 100 years from now. I think we can't look at that far away. The change has been changing so fast. So I will say, looking at, say, 20, 30 years, is Chinese political system sustainable? Can it continue to be supported by most Chinese government? By most Chinese people. Will there be a civil war in China due to some mistakes by this system. And then hence the failure of the current political system in China. So that is one part of this sustainability problem. The other part of the sustainability is, of course, the resource use and the economic development. Can China continue to develop, deliver the promise of improving people's livelihood for the near foreseeable future, let's say 20, 30 years? If they can't do it, probably they will lose the support of the common people, and that will be a big problem. So that will be the two upcoming discussions. Okay, now I open up for people to comment, and then yes, please unmute yourself, please. Yes.
Are there any pockets of dissatisfaction in China with their economic position? Like, we would imagine that everybody has the same opportunity pretty much, but are there pockets of poverty? Are there pockets of poverty?
There are two issues here. Is the removing abject poverty really 100% successful, or is just a propaganda? Okay, so that is one part of the question. Whether they say they have removed abject poverty, is that true? That's one question we need to answer. The other question is, of course, whether some of these people would have already lived out of poverty, return to poverty, return to being poor. And then the third question is, as you put it, are there pockets where there are huge dissatisfaction, causing, let's say, one huge demonstration, protest, or eventually evolve into something major? Well, I'm a desktop researcher. I don't go out to collect data directly. So I can only have a little bit of travel experience, looking at the people, and talking with the people, and a little bit here, there, and then looking at the news, etc. On average, China has about 300 protests every day. That's on average. But all these protests is usually on a very small matter. For example, complaining about the water flooding, or certain bureaucrats is corrupt, etc. Yes, because this is a huge country, 1.4 billion people. And therefore, among people, there are always good people and there's always bad people. Bad people always exist. So yes, there are dissatisfaction. So Chinese has a website monitoring the number of protests every day. And the scale of the protests, how large is that? So yes, there are pockets of dissatisfaction, but usually very small. Yes. Yeah.
What is the wage discrepancy there, say for a lawyer and a labourer?
The gap is still pretty large. We have people like the big business owner making billions a year, not million, it's billions a year. And there are also laborers. Now, at the moment, the average salary near Hong Kong, not in Hong Kong, near Hong Kong, in Shenzhen and the nearby region, is around 300 renminbi per month. 300. So one Australian dollar is about 4 renminbi. So 3,000 renminbi is about 1,000 Australian dollar. Let's say 1,000 Australian dollar is the average of waiter in area near Hong Kong, including Shenzhen. And that's why in Shenzhen, the standard living is pretty low. But in Shanghai, for example, no, not, you don't need to go to Shanghai. Let's say go to Guangzhou. I was in Guangzhou and is in one of the Western 5-star hotel. So my sister and I want to book a seat in the Sky Lounge at the top level in their bar. So the girls there said to us that if we want to book a place there for 1 hour, the minimum expense, the minimum fee is 2,500 renminbi. So that means 1 hour there per person is equal almost to 3 weeks' work of the lowest worker. And they say, the waiter there said, you better book now, otherwise it will be full. So there is a huge discrepancy, yes. I would say so.
Albert, one of the
Yes.
reasons I would have thought China has done so well is because of the huge population, the low wages, and the emphasis on hard work, and maybe then on education. As the living standards increase and more opportunities, people have more opportunities for different things that they want to pursue. Like the West, the people will be having less children, and the population is aging. And there's also, I think, as it becomes a bit more capitalistic, there's an increasing amount of corruption, I would have thought. So is that going to affect the China generally, both in political terms and in economic terms?
Well, of course, yes. The answer is, of course, yes. But let me put in a bit of my thinking here. If Chinese people said the wages doesn't increase, then the Chinese people's satisfaction with the government will decrease. Very obvious. We want to improve our lives. If we can't improve our lives, then of course the system has problem, and therefore there will be more dissatisfaction. So the question is, how can China continue to increase its wages? Yes, we started from low, very, very low. But as Richard said in the video, the Chinese people's wages has increased at least 4 times, even more. I remember when we was talking in the 1960s, they talk about, you do think 36 renminbi, you don't do think you almost 36 renminbi. So 36 renminbi is a monthly salary at that time. Of course, the 1 renminbi at that time buy much more things than renminbi today. So let's say at that time you have about 300 something renminbi equivalent today, 10 times, okay, the inflation. But at that time, yes, but today, as I said, we have people making $1 billion per month, and we have people making a few thousand renminbi per month. It's a huge difference. But these are two extreme removed. If we look at the bulk of the population, obviously looking at their clothing, looking at their health, looking at their accessories around themselves, like mobile phones, watches, etc., they obviously have improved a lot. And that makes the government satisfaction very high. People see the improvement, including seeing their living area improve, moving from leaky roofs huts into buildings with modern facility. from a place where you don't have electricity to a place with running electricity, high speed telecommunications, easy movement around the places, can go to different places at any time they like. That's huge improvement. The question is, how can we continue to improve? And Chinese population is going to shrink. First of all, by the one-child policy. And then today, they have a free-child policy. But the problem is not the policy now, it's the ladies doesn't want to give too many births. 2 births at the maximum. And if one lady gives 2 births at maximum, it is not sustainable. Chinese population is going to shrink, to getting smaller. But if we want to continue to grow economically, then we have to increase their income. How to do that? That is a question I want to answer in the economic part of looking at how China can grow while being sustainable. But that's a very good question. Thank you. Anyone else? Yes, please. Unmute yourself.
How would the Chinese people deal with vandalism?
Chinese have no vandalism problem as such, because we heard about CCTV everywhere. Okay, Chinese today is very safe in terms of personal wealth and security. When you go out into the public, remember this is public, so your movement is being monitored by CCTV and AI systems, and therefore vandalism is almost zero, and you won't be able to vandalize because everybody's keep that. Another way is the way Chinese look at public space is quite different from here. Now here our public space is usually, for example, maybe in our field a little bit footy, etc. Okay, and then nobody is using a public space. For example, there's a road there with very little traffic. For example, the road, the street in front of my house, it is a private street that's serving about 60 properties, almost no traffic. Here, nobody is playing badminton on the street. But in China, then in this public area, you will see people playing badminton while a car moves by. They treat it public is public. They can do everything they like. And we also notice the ladies in China like to dance in the public square. And these dancing parties, I would say, if you have a size of a basketball, there will be one dancing party there. And then in the next basketball area, there will be another dancing party there. And they are dancing different styles. Just one group meeting the other group almost all the way. Public space, public. Nobody use, then I will use it in whatever way I like, including playing basketball, football, etc. So in this area, you can't do vandalism because there will be a lot of other people in the park, either singing, playing music, etc., and watching. And they will ask, "What are you doing?" You can't.
Albert, I find it. Sorry.
Yes, please.
I find it quite funny, really, that for so many years we have complained. The West has complained about China's CCTV cameras everywhere and monitoring, and now we're putting more of those in ourselves, and the police are relying on them to convict people that have committed crime. So that's one quite strange thing. But what I wonder, if I could ask a personal question, why do you prefer living in Australia compared to China when China is so peaceful and advancing and economically so good?
Because I can't move back to China.
You can't.
So I can't. When I come here, I almost move everything to here. I have left nothing in Hong Kong. Of course, I can't move my brother and sisters here, but what I can move, I move. So I come here completely. At my age today, asking me to go back to China means I have to sell my property here, move my money over to China, and hopefully my pension also comes with me to China. Then I might have a living. Otherwise, it would be very difficult. So I can't. The simple answer is I can't.
Please understand, I'm not asking you to move. I just wondered why.
That's what I'm explaining to you. To me, I can't.
Yeah.
And then during my visit, now I have been in Hong Kong from November to January, and then from March to April. So I have been to Hong Kong in the last 4 months, 3 months, 4 months. In one of those, I visited a retirement home in Guangzhou. Wow. I like to go there on the last few years of my life. It has about just a little bit shy of 900 beds, 890 something, just a little bit shy of 900 beds on a property of 30 acres, 30 acres. And all the beds are in a 5-level buildings. There's no swimming pool, but there are tracks around the building with beautiful gardening. And the recreation includes calligraphy, mahjong, and etc. Everything you can think about, karaoke, etc., etc. If you are still independent, that means you are not 100% bedladen, then it is 5,000 renminbi per month. So it is about 1,000 something Australian per month. But if you are 100% dependent, depending on the nurse then you will be about double. You about $2,000 per month, Australian dollars. And given the size of the room, the cleanliness, etc., and the people, I think my last few years I want to spend it there. But whether I can do it or not, that it depends on the physical condition, of course, and the financial conditions. But I think yes, if I can, I would rather move back. And now, I also have a cousin who lives in one of the poorest province, and he said, in this poor province, the minimum daily expense, including everything, is 40 renminbi, so 10 Australian dollars. Put it that way. The minimum daily expense to sustain your life is 10 Australian dollars. So probably now there's a very huge difference between the Chinese poor and the Western poor. No matter how poor you are almost not homeless, unless you move from your village into the city, and then you can't afford the city, then you become homeless. But the simple method of dealing this kind of homelessness is take that people back to his village, that he has a house, because Chinese people have been living on the space for the last hundreds of generations. So they always, everybody. So the reason why some pockets are poor is because that area cannot produce sufficient resources to sustain the population. For example, the land too infertile, or maybe too mountainous, etc., etc. So the solution to that is move that group of people out from that area into another area where there are jobs, there are opportunities. And then the original area becomes a tourist attraction. And some of these old villagers will come back to that area and run the tourists. This week is the Labor Week. The Labor Day is 1st of May. And Chinese being a Communist Party system, they have 1 week holiday. And today is still their holiday. And on day number 1, May 1st, the bund in Shanghai, the riverside along the Yangtze River, had about 30,000 people there. No, 300,000 people there. It is people touching people. Let me see whether I can find that video and then show it to you. It's just people, mountain people see. Let's see. No, I can find it from here. It's easier. No, it's fine. Okay, I'll share this screen for you to look at how many people in Shanghai on the May 1st. Okay, here, share screen, this one, share. This is at night in Shanghai on May 1st.
Unreal.
Unbelievable.
Great city, though.
Now, when I showed this video to some of my friends, there are a few number of very interesting observations. I don't know whether you will see the same thing as my friends see it. First of all, the people are moving. They are moving. Nobody is in a hurry. Everybody fall in line, move according to direction. Traffic is not interrupted. We have police guarding everywhere. And of course, on the edges of the crowd, you will see people wearing a red vest. Here, here, here. There are many volunteers helping the police to manage the order. This side, people all move in one direction. On this side, see people moving down here, and the people are moving out from this direction. There's no mixing of people. You can't mix because it's you won't be able to do this unless it is in China. This is my comment from my friends when they look at this video. I don't know what you think, but I find it amazing.
Yeah.
Oh, with the video, when you upload the program from today onto the website, will you be including the full video or a link to it?
Oh, I will include the whole recording.
Yeah, that's the Richard Wolf one.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Good.
Okay. Now, I think it's about time. I thank you for your attention, and then we will talk about whether the political system in China is sustainable next week. Okay,
Albert,
thank you.
Albert, if I
Yes.
can just ask a question that you can actually answer next week, which you may be intending to. If it became unsustainable, which direction do you think it would go? I'll leave that for you to think about for the week and come back and answer.
Okay, thank you. This is a very good hint. Thank you so much. Okay,
Thanks,
bye
Norbert.
bye.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, bye bye. Bye
Thanks a
bye.
lot.
Thank you.